Welcome to English Stories for Listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you genuinely want to be fluent in English.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I want to tell you a story. It's a story about why speaking English is important and how it can change your life, just like it changed mine. I still remember the first time I tried to speak English. My hands were shaking, my voice was low, and I felt like everyone was staring at me. I was in school and my teacher, Mr. Parker, asked me to say something in English. I stood there looking down at my shoes, feeling like I was about to cry. I didn't know how to speak well then. Every word felt hard, like lifting something too heavy. I felt alone because my friends could speak English, but I couldn't. I remember one time I missed a school trip because I didn't understand the instructions in English. I was heartbroken. I went home and I cried that night. My mum held me and she said, "Emily, you can do this. You just have to practice." So I did. I practiced every day, even when I didn't want to. I would look at myself in the mirror and try to say simple words like hello and good morning at first. It felt silly, but over time it got easier. Speaking English became less scary. And soon I realized something: the more I practiced, the better I became. That's the first tip I want to share with you. Practice speaking every day, even if it's just a little. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to try. I made small goals for myself, like saying one new word a day. One time I learned the word brave. It felt special to me because that's what I wanted, to be brave enough to speak. I would whisper it to myself when I felt scared: brave, brave, brave. Over time, English didn't feel like a wall I couldn't climb anymore. It started to feel like a door I could open. One day I was sitting in class, and a girl named Sarah, who was really good at English, came up to me. She smiled and asked me in English if I wanted to study together. I was nervous, but I remembered all the times I had practiced. I said yes, I would like that. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. We became good friends, and she helped me with my English. That's the second tip: find a friend to practice with. It's easier when you're not alone. Sometimes I would get frustrated and want to give up. I remember one time I was studying late at night, trying to read an English book, and I started crying because I didn't understand anything. My dad saw me, and he said, "Emily, it's okay to feel upset. It just means you care. But don't give up. You're getting better every day." I'll never forget those words. That's tip number 3. It's okay to feel frustrated. It means you're growing. After that night, I tried to be kinder to myself. I started watching English shows with subtitles. I would repeat the lines I heard, even if they didn't make sense at first. One of my favorite shows was about a girl who moved to a new city, and she didn't know the language either. Watching her learn gave me hope. That's another tip: watch English movies or shows and try to repeat what you hear. It's a fun way to practice, and you'll learn how real conversations sound. Then came a day that changed everything for me. There was a big speech contest at school, and my teacher encouraged me to join. I was terrified. I thought, there's no way I can do this, but I practiced. Every night I would stand in my room and pretend I was on stage. The day of the contest, my heart was beating so fast I thought it would jump out of my chest. But when I got up there, something amazing happened. I spoke. My words weren't perfect, but they were mine. And when I finished, the crowd clapped. I felt like I could fly. That's tip number 5. Don't be afraid to speak in front of others. It's scary, but it will make you stronger. I didn't win the contest, but I won something more important. I won confidence. I learned that speaking English wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave and about communicating my thoughts, my feelings, and my heart. That's what English does. It connects people. It helped me make friends, understand my teachers, and even helped me comfort someone when they were feeling down. There was one time when Sarah was really sad. She had a bad day, and I could see it in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but I could feel it. So I went up to her and said in my best English, "It's okay to feel sad. I'm here for you." She smiled through her tears, and that's when I realized how powerful words can be. Tip number 6. Use English to connect with people. It's not just about speaking perfectly, it's about sharing your heart. Every day I got a little better. I would try to learn new words, and I would talk to my teachers more. Even small conversations, like asking, "How are you?" helped me grow. Tip number 7. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. Every mistake you make brings you closer to getting it right. I remember another time when I had to order food in English at a restaurant. I was so nervous, but I took a deep breath and said, "Can I have a burger, please?" The waiter smiled and said, "Sure." It was such a small thing, but it made me feel proud. That's tip number 8. Practice English in real-life situations. Even small things like ordering food can help you improve. Tip number 9 is something my teacher, Mr. Parker, always told me: listen more than you speak. When you listen, you learn. I started listening to English songs and podcasts. Sometimes I didn't understand every word, but that's okay. The more you listen, the more your brain starts to pick up the sounds and patterns of the language. I want to share a memory that still makes me smile. One day, my younger brother came to me with his homework. He had to write a short story in English, but he didn't know where to start. I sat with him, and together we wrote a simple story about a cat who wanted to fly. We laughed as we made up the story, and I realized how far I had come. I was helping someone else learn English, That's tip number 10. Teach others what you know. When you teach, you learn even more. There were moments when I felt discouraged, like I wasn't improving fast enough. But I kept going. One of the things that helped me was setting small, realistic goals. Tip number 11. Set small goals. Instead of trying to learn everything at once, focus on one thing at a time. Maybe one day you focus on learning new vocabulary, and the next day you focus on pronunciation. I also started reading books in English, even if they were children's books. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I was reading. Tip number 12. Read books in English, even if they're simple. The more you read, the more you'll improve your vocabulary and understanding of the language. As I continued to practice, I noticed something else. My confidence grew not just in English, but in other parts of my life too. That's tip number 13. Learning English can boost your overall confidence. When you learn a new skill, it makes you feel capable and strong. I remember when I had to give a presentation in class. It was a big project, and I was nervous. But this time, I wasn't as scared as before. I knew I had practiced and I was ready. When I finished, my teacher smiled and said, "You've come a long way, Emily. I'll never forget that moment." Tip number 14. Celebrate your progress. Even if it's small, every step forward is a victory. Sometimes learning English feels like climbing a mountain. You look up and it seems so far away. But if you take it one step at a time, you'll reach the top. Tip number 15. Take your time. You don't have to rush. Learning a new language is a journey, and it's okay to go at your own pace. I started using flashcards to remember new words. It was a simple tool, but it worked. I would write the English word on one side and the meaning in my language on the other. I'd quiz myself whenever I had a free moment. That's tip number 16. Use flashcards to learn new vocabulary. It's a fun and easy way to memorize words. I want to share another story with you. One day I was at the park and I saw a little girl crying. She had fallen off her bike. I went over to her and in English I said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She looked up at me and nodded. I helped her up and she smiled through her tears. That's when I realized how important it is to know English, not just for school, but for life. You never know when you'll need to help someone. That's tip number 17. Learn English because it helps you connect with people in ways you can't imagine. Sometimes I would get tired of studying and I didn't want to practice anymore. But I kept going because I knew that every time I practiced, I was getting closer to my goal. That's tip number 18. Stay motivated, even when it's hard. Remember why you started. I remember one evening when I sat in my room, feeling overwhelmed. My textbooks were open, but all I wanted to do was close them and give up. I felt like I wasn't making progress fast enough, like I was stuck in the same place. My mum came in and saw me sitting there. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me and put her arm around me. After a while, she said, "Emily, you've come so far. Every step, even the small ones, brings you closer to where you want to be. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with me, and they became tip number 19: be patient with yourself. Learning a new language takes time, and you need to be kind to yourself along the way. One of the most helpful things I did during my journey was to practice speaking out loud, even when I was alone. I would talk to myself in English, narrating my day as if I were explaining it to someone. For example, I would say, "Now I'm going to make breakfast," or "I need to finish my homework." At first it felt silly, but over time it helped me get used to forming sentences and speaking without thinking too much. That's tip number 20: talk to yourself in English. It might feel strange, but it's a great way to practice speaking without pressure. One day, during a family gathering, my cousin Jess, who lived in the city, came to visit. She was always so confident, and I admired how easily she spoke English. During dinner, she asked me, "Emily, how's your English coming along?" I smiled nervously and replied, "It's getting better." She grinned and said, "That's the spirit. You should come visit me sometime. We'll go to an English-speaking event together." I was terrified but excited at the same time. It reminded me of tip number 21: push yourself out of your comfort zone. If you always stay where it's safe, you'll never grow. A few weeks later, I went to the city to visit Jess. She took me to a coffee shop where they were having an open mic night. People were going up to the stage and sharing poems or stories in English. Jess nudged me and whispered, "You should try My Heart Raced." Could I really do it? Before I knew it, I was walking to the stage. I didn't have a poem, but I decided to share a story, my story about learning English. My voice shook at first, but then, as I spoke, something amazing happened. The words started flowing, and I felt this incredible connection with the people in the room. When I finished, they clapped, and I felt a sense of accomplishment that I had never felt before. That night became one of my most powerful memories, and it taught me tip number 22: don't be afraid to share your story. Everyone has a journey, and your experiences can inspire others. Jess hugged me after, and I felt so proud of myself. It was like all the little moments of practice had led up to that one big moment, and I knew then that speaking English was no longer something I feared. It was something I embraced. Jess looked at me and said, "See, you're more capable than you think." And that's when I realized tip number 23: believe in yourself, even when it's hard. If you don't believe in yourself, it's harder for others to believe in you. As time went on, I started to enjoy learning English. It wasn't just a task anymore, it was something I looked forward to. I found joy in learning new words and discovering how to express myself in different ways. And that's tip number 24, find joy in the process. If you can make learning fun, it won't feel like work anymore. One of the most emotional moments for me was when my teacher, Mr. Parker, asked me to read aloud in class. A year before, I would have been terrified, but this time I felt ready. I stood up, took a deep breath, and read the passage. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't stumble like I used to. When I finished, Mr. Parker smiled at me and said, "Well done. Emily, those words meant everything to me, and I felt tears in my eyes because I knew how far I had come." That's tip number 25, celebrate the moments when you feel proud. It's these moments that will keep you going when things get tough. Sometimes, the road to learning a new language can feel lonely. You might feel like no one understands what you're going through. But remember, you're not alone. There are so many people out there, just like you, trying their best to learn English. That's tip number 26, join a community of English learners. Whether it's an online group, a class, or just a few friends, having people to share your journey with makes it easier. Another tip I want to share is something that really helped me speak slowly and clearly. Tip number 27, when I first started, I would try to rush through my sentences because I was so nervous. But I learned that speaking slowly gives you time to think about your words, and it helps others understand you better. One of my favorite things to do was to write in English. I started keeping a journal, and every day I would write a few sentences about my day. Sometimes I didn't know the right words, but I would try my best. Looking back on those journals now, I can see how much I've improved. That's tip number 28, write in English, even if it's just a little every day. Writing helps you practice grammar and vocabulary, and it's a great way to track your progress. As I continued learning, I realized that English wasn't just a subject in school anymore, it was becoming a part of my life. I started to dream in English, think in English, and even laugh in English. It was like I was becoming a new version of myself, and it felt good. That's tip number 29, make English a part of your everyday life. Whether it's listening to music, reading books, or having conversations, the more you use English, the more natural it will feel. One of the last tips I want to share, but certainly not the least, is this: never stop learning. Tip number 30. Even now, I'm still learning new words and improving my skills. Learning a language is a lifelong journey, and that's what makes it so exciting. There's always something new to discover. As I sit here writing this, I can't help but smile. English has become such a beautiful part of my life, and I hope it becomes a beautiful part of yours too. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. So keep practicing, keep speaking, And remember, you are capable of more than you think. And now I ask you, what's your story? How has learning English changed your life? What are your struggles, your victories? I'd love to hear from you because we're all on this journey together.